We're here to talk about Silicon Valley real estate market and then the Greater Bay Area, 13 counties. We'll go over these green URLs at the end. Richard Calhoun, Creekside Realty, working with buyers and sellers here in Silicon Valley. Here's the data set that we're going over. There's some unique features on this. I look at the amount of overbidding. I look at the frequency of price reductions. I look at offers accepted versus pending sales. That makes a huge difference. For example, right now, the refinance market has dried up, allowing the resale market to go through more rapidly. Therefore, the typical resale transaction spending less time in escrow, resulting in fewer number of pending offers at any given time. The result is a lot of people are reporting record low number of pending sales, where my data shows that we're actually having more offers accepted than we are just last year. There's a lot of nuances that I use to try to better understand the market from a real estate point of view, actively working with buyers and sellers. This is a summary chart of the heat maps that are coming up. On the left-hand side is the micro markets. The top are the different metrics that we're going to look at. Then the numbers are the actual raw data. And then the color coding is whether it's a hot marketplace or a cool marketplace, buyers or sellers marketplace. Here's the first thing. What we're doing here is we're looking at the active inventory compared to the 10-year median for the same week. When you have only 68% of the inventory, you have less inventory, less choice. That favors the seller, therefore it's pink in color. Then you flip down to some areas like the Bay cities, the cities on the bay side of the ridge line in San Mateo County. They have 142%, 42% more inventory than they normally do at this time of the year. That favors the buyers because there's more houses to pick from, therefore there's less competition. Now we flip over and look at the other option, which is the number of offers. And we're comparing the number of offers now again to the 10-year median. And here, for the most part, you can see the number of offers is lagging behind. One of the things I will comment on is I look at the offers that accepted in the past 5 weeks. There's a lot of people that look at pending sales. In fact, that's far more common. There's a huge problem with pending sales, and that's actually showing up in their data right now. They're talking about how we're having record low number of pending sales. One of the reasons, unrelated to the number of offers and the number of transactions that we're having a record low number of pending sales, is there's no refinances going on. With the increase in interest rates, no homeowners are refinancing their loan. The loan pipeline isn't as congested. You're able to close your transactions quicker. That gives each transaction less time in the pending status, and therefore there's less pending sales. If you went from 35 days to close an escrow to 30, that's a 1/7 improvement, a 17% reduction in the number of pending sales. And looking at the number of offers that accepted, that doesn't get impacted whatsoever. And therefore, I think the number of offers that were accepted in the last period of time, I used 5 weeks, is a better metric. We are down, but we're not at a record low, and we'll see that in a little bit where we're having more transactions now than we did just last year. Now we're looking at days of unsold inventory compared to the 10-year median. We're not looking at days of unsold inventory today, but we're looking at it today compared to where it normally is. And here it's very clear. You can see that San Mateo County is much slower than you had anticipated to being. Most of the valley is sort of in a balanced marketplace. Sort of the exception in Santa Clara County are the real affordable areas in central South San Jose and East San Jose, where again it has a higher DUI. It's 43.8% above where it normally is, 1.5 times what it normally is, which is a longer time on the marketplace. For Alameda County, for the first 3 slides, I do not have the individual data, just county-wide data. Now we're flipping back and looking at just raw numbers today alone. We're looking at days of unsold inventory. We're comparing that to what I think is a normal marketplace. And again, here Silicon Valley is completely different than the rest of the country. Most of the country talks about 3 to 6 or 4 to 6 months being a balanced marketplace. I consider 40 to 80 days, from just a little bit over 1 month to less than 3 months, to be a balanced marketplace locally. And we have to get almost under a month and a half to be into a strong seller's marketplace. We're just a different animal than most of the real estate marketplace. You can see one of the hottest areas right now are the affordable areas in Santa Clara County. The moderate affordable areas are right around 20 days unsold inventory. Overall, you're probably somewhere around 35 days of unsold inventory if you were sort of to do an average for the whole valley. But it's really hard to do that just looking at this number, because each micro market area is a different in size. Now we're looking at something that's maybe easier for the layperson to understand, and that is long marketing time. What does the long typical successful seller take to market their property? The quicker that is, the more it favors the seller. The longer it is, the more it favors the buyer. You can see in the San Mateo coast, they're just over 3 months at 95 days. Or you come into Cupertino, Sunnyvale, they're one of the fastest areas. They're tied for Fremont at 17 days. The faster that is, the more it favors the seller. And what it's basically doing in the case of Cupertino, Sunnyvale, it's saying that 75% of the successful sellers are able to sell their home in 17 days or less. A lot of them are going to sell after, somewhere between 5 and 10 days, that first weekend on the market. Some are going to sell at the second weekend. And then after that, it really drops off. 75% of all sellers in Cupertino are selling within that 17-day time frame. Now we're looking at what the sellers are doing to their asking price to get the offer accepted. This isn't what the buyer does to get an offer accepted, but this is what the seller does to his asking price. How much are they adjusting their price down? This is what I call a tight metrics, and it's not as tight as I thought it was, but it's the average ask price reduction. And with 75% of the sellers selling in 17 days in Cupertino, they don't even have time to reduce their price. This average is fairly small. And the biggest number I'm seeing is a 5.3% reduction in Atherton. And what that's basically saying is sellers will reduce their own asking price 5.3% before the offer comes in. But again, that's on average, with most of the sellers not reducing the price at all. Now we look at the frequency. How common is it to reduce their price? And you can see that a lot of these areas are just over 10% of the sellers reducing their price. Only 10% of the sellers reducing their price, which means 90% of the sellers aren't reducing their price at all. One of the areas that has the biggest price reductions is the San Mateo County coast, where half of all sellers have reduced their price at least a little bit before the offer comes in the door. Now we're flipping over and looking at the same thing on the buyer's side. When the offer comes in the door, how much are the buyers overbidding, or in the case of South County, underbidding? They're actually taking 7/10 of a price reduction. The biggest increase is in Alameda and Berkeley, the city of Alameda and Berkeley, at 16%. And that is, on average, buyers are coming in 16% above the seller's asking price. Now, that includes the few that are in that area that get below. But again, this would be a fairly tight metric because you have people on both sides of 100%. Now we look at the frequency of overbidding, and this is probably surprising, with the days on sold inventory increasing, the days on market increasing. In Santa Clara County, we still have about 2/3 of all sellers are getting an offer that's over their asking price. Now, they might be one of the 10% of the sellers that reduced their price, and then it's coming in over their ask price, because this is over or under compared to the asking price at the time the offer comes in, not their original asking price, which would be another metric to follow. Then you have some areas in the San Mateo County where you're probably closer to 50%, right? Half the sellers are getting more, half are getting less. And Alameda County is much more like Santa Clara County, somewhere right around 2/3 or maybe 65%. Now we're looking at the long-term performance of the marketplace. What's the appreciation done since the last 9 months of 2015? Basically an 8-year appreciation gauge, how much appreciation there's been in 18 years. You can see some areas in Santa Clara County are almost at 80%, and we were higher than 80%. I think we peaked out at 93%, but we're currently at 80%. Alameda County is at 85 in a lot of the areas, and maybe the further out in the Livermore area, maybe it's only 70%. But look at that sharp contrast to San Mateo County, where there's only somewhere around 40–50% appreciation in that period of time. Probably the area that's jumping out the most right now is Los Altos, Palo Alto, at only 20%. So yes, that is in Santa Clara County, but it's a market unto itself. And there, since in 8 years, they've only had 20% appreciation. So you go from there to Milpitas, where it's at 80%. Milpitas, people that would have bought back in 2015 have gotten 4 times the appreciation that someone that bought in Los Altos. Now, you have to watch this over a period of time because, for example, the Los Altos Palo Alto area may not be that many transactions happening, but maybe simply a matter of the homes that are selling now versus the actual value of the property. This is just comparing the amount the median price went up. Now we're looking at price. And a lot of people follow just that median price. And what I find is it's useful to know what's going on around the median price. The middle number is the median. The number to the left is the cheapest 10%. The number to the right is the most expensive 10%. So 80% of the homes are between these two values. In South County, for example, I would say that 80% of the homes, single-family homes that have closed escrow in the last 35 days, between essentially $900,000 and 1.9 million. You have $1 million range, but you only have a $350,000 range where the first 40% come, and then you have a 750, a $750,000 range where the second 40% come from. You can see that the cheaper end is more densely populated with transactions because you're only going up 25% and you're having half the transactions, half of 80 is 40. You're having 40% of all transactions in that $250,000. And then to get in the next 40% of the transactions, you have to go up $750,000 in price. It just gives you a little bit more sense. You might be looking at the cheapest homes in an area, then you would look at the 10%, or you might be looking at the more expensive areas, and then you would want to look at the 90 percentile to get a better handle on what's happening in that market that impacts your individual purchase. Here's a summary of, again, what we went over. I want to point out the payments here on the right-hand side are just rough estimates using an 80% loan, using the nationwide number for jumbo loans, even on conforming loan limits. And conforming loan limits are going up to $766,550 for 2024. And with conforming loans being more expensive than jumbo loans, that actually is negatively impacting affordability. Normally, we look forward to the new loans because the buyer used to be able to get lower interest rates on conforming money. That inverted about 2-3 years ago, and it has not reverted back, which is just interesting. Now you can borrow more money at a lower rate, but for someone that wanted to borrow $750,000 only, and that may be all they can qualify for in 2024, and in a matter of days, when lenders changed over to the 2024 number, their affordability actually went down. Now what I'm doing here is taking all those 20 micro market areas, putting it in a blender, and just looking at the key metrics. You have inventory right now in Silicon Valley, which is Santa Clara, San Mateo, and Alameda County. We only have 88% of the inventory that you'd expect to have at this time of the year. But on offers, we only have 73%. And since the offers are more below than the active listings, your days unsold inventory is at 111%, a slower marketplace than you typically have. You can see that we spent the bulk of 2023, at least the first 3 quarters, having a faster marketplace than normal. And now basically this fourth quarter, we're above the 100% and we're having a slower market than we typically do at this time of the year. And here's where the pending sales come in. You can see that last year we only sold 1,403 transactions in the 35-day period of time. This year we're at 1,448. It's not a huge improvement, but it's a 3% higher number. Clearly, we're not having a record low volume of offers accepted. We may have a record low number of pending offers, but it's my speculation, because I don't have the data to back this up, but it's my speculation the reason these two numbers actually agree are that pending transactions are closing more rapidly. And I can speak for my own clients. We all closed faster than we ever thought because the lender was ready, the house was vacant, we moved forward. The lenders are now encouraging, or at least available, to close faster than a 28-day close without even putting the pressure on them. And that's basically unheard of. I used to like 30 and 35-day closes because that was the time frame for lenders to get ready. I believe that is the reason why we're having a record low number of pending transactions. This is actually looking at what's happening to the monthly payments. The blue line at the bottom is the cheapest 10%. The middle line is the median, and the red line at the top is the top 90%. And you can see the decrease here is basically an interest rate decrease. It could be property values decreasing, but I do know interest rates came down quite a bit. You can see that payments for sort of the more expensive property went from somewhere around $15,000 a month to somewhere around $25,000 a month for the typical home, which is much more representative, because typically if you're buying that 90% home, you're not doing an 80% loan. But for your typical buyer, we had payments somewhere down here, maybe around $6,500 for a long period of time. And now we're at 12,500. Not a doubling of payments, but darn close to a doubling of payments. Now what we're looking at is the ask price reduction. These are the sellers' ask prices, how much they reduced it. This is based on offers that were accepted because you don't know if their seller will do more price adjustments until that offer comes in. The huge advantage of this number is you don't have to wait for escrows to close. And each one of these is a line. Initially, the lines are 4 or 5 weeks apart, trying to approximate a month. And then when I get down to 13 weeks, which is 3 months, I flip over and do every week. We go from 12 months down to 3 months. Then we go from 3 months, which is 13 weeks, down to the current week. And I'll just step through. Yeah, that's the bottom right there, going up. There's the peak. Now you can sort of see we settled out near the peak. This is sort of your spring, summer rush. And then in the last couple distributions, starting right about there, you can start seeing it, we marching down quite a bit and a lot more movement. And I expect more movement because, a year ago we were down here at the orange line, just above the blue line. I don't expect to get back down to that level, but I do expect to approach that level in the not distant future, because that's 4 weeks out in the future. Anyway, now we're flipping over and looking at the same thing, but on the overbids, how much the buyers are coming in and overbidding. And again, each line is a weekly distribution. And just slow down a second and show you how you read this. So basically, 35% of the sellers, and it's hard to see, but there's the purple line, 35% of the sellers are receiving about 9% above their asking price, maybe 8% above their asking price. You can pick what number you're at. 20% of the sellers are getting about 5 or 6% above their asking price. And that's sort of how you do it. Come way out here, and the purple line is right here, leaving somewhere around 70% of the sellers are getting more than their asking price. Their asking price or more than their asking price. I'll step through. There's the bottom. Now you're moving up. And this is a more stable index for the most part. You can see that we're up there. And now we have to wait for escrows to close. So regardless of whether the 35 days or 28 days, this is a lagging indicator. But again, you're starting to see the number moving down a little bit. Now what we're doing is looking at each one of the components. The purple line is Silicon Valley, the 3 counties in a blender. The red line is the line that's going to favor the sellers the most. And if you look back, you can see the huge cycle that the data has. The gray line might be the most important one to look at for the annual cycle, because that's the typical. That's where you'd expect the market to be. Then the extremes are the blue on favoring the buyer, red on favoring the seller. Right now, we're favoring the seller at 1604 number of active listings in Silicon Valley. It's not quite a record low. And, you're starting to get some separation, because this is basically 1,500. You're 100 above the least you'd expect, but you're 230 below where you'd expect it to be. Less inventory than you expect, but more than we've had for the hottest years. Same concept. And this is, again, the number of offers, and I highlighted not pending, and we already explained that, why that's important. The number of offers accepted is just above the record, not the record low, but the 10 percentile. There's one out of the past 10 years that would have had less number of offers. And as we've already talked about, that was just last year, as it turns out. Here's where you'd expect offers to be. And then if you had a lot of offers, that would be favoring the seller. It's up there at 2,300. Same concept with the days on sold inventory. Here, the lower the number, the faster the marketplace is. And you can see that the typical turn, the actual data turn, the low turn, and the high end turn, but it returned. And this is a lot of this is Thanksgiving timing and everything. Thanksgiving, if I'm doing this quick on the top of my head, is somewhere between November 22nd and November 28th. And with the heavy cycle that real estate has, that has a huge impact on the data. And you have to get away from major holidays to really understand the data. In another week, we'll have better data, but the trend is still pretty clear. You can see the dip down. Usually you dip down going into the holiday season, and that's because sellers pull out of the market before the buyers. The buyers still work, and then you rebound after the holiday, and that's basically what we did. The dip for this year is the holiday rebound, and then next week we'll probably be going down again. Here's days of unsold inventory compared to typical. Again, a low number favors the seller, which is why the red line on the bottom. But you can see we've been most of the 2023 below But basically, fourth quarter, we have spent above where you'd expect to be. Not hugely above. Right now, we're 11% slower than you'd expect to be. This is the long typical seller. How many days are they on the market to sell their property? And you can see in 2023, we were basically right at the fastest time frame. And then here's first quarter, this fourth quarter, this is October 1st. And sometime after that, maybe mid-October, we did an abrupt turn and no longer following the red line, and we split away, and we're now at 23 days. 23 days is very fast for 75% of the sellers to sell, but it's not as fast as we've been at 16, nor is it as high as we typically are at 33 days. Now, it's noteworthy, there's not much difference between 33 days, where you'd expect the market to be, and the long typical, or the longest you'd expect it to be, which is only 36 days. That is one of the reasons I put the 3 lines on there. The repeating lines is the gray line is where you'd expect the market to be. The red line is where the market is in a hot marketplace, and the blue line is where the market is in a cold marketplace, and it's nonlinear. There's only 3 days between a typical and a cool marketplace, but there's, if I'm doing my math right, 17 days between the typical and a hot marketplace. And that changes depending on the time of the year and what metric you're looking at. Here now we're looking at the days on market 75th percentile compared to the typical. They're only at 70%. We're 30% faster than we typically are at this time of the year. Even though we have slowed down, we're still much faster than we typically are. Here's the ask price reductions. This is what the sellers are reducing their price prior to getting that offer in to entice the offer to come in. Our data right now is at 98.5%. That says that the sellers are taking a 1.5% price reduction. Typically, they take a 1.1% price reduction. In a cool marketplace, they're taking a 2.6% price reduction. We're taking roughly half the price reductions that we do in a cool marketplace. And again, you can see the disproportionate difference between typical and a slow and typical and a hot marketplace. So just pay attention to that. It gives you an idea, because you can have periods of time like here, you come back to 2022 that we all remember, the peak of the marketplace. And, you could actually come back here on this data and almost say the peak of the marketplace was right around the middle of February. Yes, it rolled over sort of gently, but then you get over here to about April 15th, and it just dropped off the cliff like a lead balloon. And what you're looking at is the rate of change between going from the red line to the gray line, from the gray line to the blue line, and then below the blue line and staying below the blue line. But then you get down to the end of 2022, beginning of 2023, and you can see how rapidly we caught back up to the blue line, followed the blue line. Then you did a marked change. You left the blue line, jumped onto the gray line. And right now, you could argue that starting about the middle of October, we've done another abrupt change, and we're leaving the typical line. You're looking for changes because the market has a typical pattern, which is the gray line. And what you're looking for is differences between that gray line and your current data. Here's the sellers that are taking the largest 10 percentile. Now, instead of looking at all the sellers, all 100% of your sellers that accepted an offer, we're only looking at the sellers that took the biggest 10% price reduction, and they took a 16% price reduction. And that's getting pretty close to the record of a 17% price reduction. What it's saying is not many sellers are taking price reductions, but those sellers that are taking the price reductions are taking pretty substantial price reductions. And it's noteworthy in a hot marketplace that the sellers that take the biggest price reductions are taking a 9.5% price reduction, which you wouldn't think is a hot marketplace, but it is because of only 10% of the sellers. Here's your price reduction. Those sellers are taking 28% more of a price reduction than they typically do. And that's why we're above the 100% horizontal black line, and why we're favoring the blue cool buyers marketplace. As sellers take bigger price reductions, that clearly favors the buyer. Here's the frequency of price reductions. How common are price reductions? Right now, 19.3% of the sellers are taking price reductions. You should be at 19.7. I mean, that's almost a dead match. You can't get much closer than that. You can see earlier in the year, we were up there with the most price reductions you'd expect. And here you can see in the second quarter, you abruptly left the blue line and joined the gray line. And then you almost hit the red line, and now you're back up to the gray line. You can see the market ebb and flows compared to where it normally is at. And it's just useful to see that information, I believe. Here's your frequency. We're at 98%, only 2% less sellers taking a price reduction than typical. Here's your average overbidding. And again, now we're looking at all the buyers, what they come in with at their offer. And this is all Silicon Valley. Again, it's Santa Clara County, San Mateo County, and Alameda. And it's important to look at your micro markets when you're doing a decision on a particular property, but this gives you an overview of the marketplace. Right now, they're coming in at 4.8% above the marketplace. Normally it's 4.1. You're having a slightly hotter overbidding contest than you normally do. Here's the frequency of overbidding. We're at 62% of the sellers are getting more than their asking price, typically at 58%. Again, slightly more than the number that you'd expect. And here's your pricing. We're at $1.5 million. The slope blue line is sort of long-term appreciation, and you can see when prices go up, you have downward pressure. You can sit there and see at the end of each year, you tend to be below the line, and then you have upward pressure at the beginning of the next year. And that's amazingly on how predictable that is. Now we're looking at each county individually. We're no longer looking at Silicon Valley, but we're looking at all three counties. And active listings isn't really that useful because each county has its own size. San Mateo County is the smallest, and therefore it has the least inventory. You can see trends like Alameda and Santa Clara tend to be very similar, and we're pretty similar now with Alameda County having slightly more inventory than Santa Clara. Here's the same thing with raw offers. Again, Santa Clara and Alameda very close together. San Mateo County is lagging behind, but it's the smallest county, and you can see long-term trends. Here you sort of look back and see that the typical is somewhere up here around 500 for San Mateo County, and you're down just a little under 300. Days on sold inventory. This is the first metric where you can actually compare them because this now is the ratio between active listings to sales. And when Santa Clara County is the lowest, the fastest, the three counties, that is a valid data point. This is Santa Clara County is the fastest, Alameda County is in second place, and San Mateo County is the slowest at 45 days. It's almost taking 50% longer to sell in San Mateo County as it is in Santa Clara County. Here's the 75th percentile. How long is it taking that 75th percentile? Now the difference is even more telling. 24 days to sell 75% of the homes in Santa Clara County, 44, almost twice as long to sell in San Mateo County. Now, to sell in a month and a half is still reasonable, but it's clearly 45 days is clearly significantly slower than 24 days. And again, this is just how long is it taking to sell. Number of transactions, size of the community or the county doesn't matter. Here's your magnitude of price reductions. And again, this is what the sellers are reducing their own asking price. The huge advantage of this metric is you don't have to wait for escrows to close. You can see San Mateo County is doing the largest price reductions at 2.5%. Santa Clara County is next at 1.4%. And then Alameda County is the least at 1.1%. This is the frequency of those price reductions. How common are price reductions? You can see they're much more common in San Mateo County at 28%. Santa Clara and Alameda County are very close together, right around 16, 17%. This is the magnitude of overbidding. Now we're looking at what the buyers are doing when they're coming in. Alameda County has the most overbidding at 6.5%. Santa Clara County next at 3.9%. And it's actually a little surprising to see San Mateo at 2.8% above the asking price. But what could be happening here is sellers are reducing their price. That brings in the offer. The offer comes in slightly over the asking price. Here's the frequency of that overbidding. How common is it? 56% in San Mateo County, 59% in Santa Clara County. Almost no difference in the frequency of overbidding, but yet the markets are going to be completely different based on the time on the marketplace. And Alameda County is doing the best up at 68.5%. Here's the appreciation in the different areas. San Mateo County has the least appreciation at basically 56% appreciation since 2015. Alameda County is next at 65.5%. And Santa Clara County has the most appreciation at 77.5%. Here are your prices. This is on log scale. Santa Clara County at 1.7 million, San Mateo County essentially at 1.8, and Alameda County at 1.2. Same information, just on regular paper. My numbers are a little bit different for Alameda County. 1225 versus 1240. I suspect the 1240 is last week's data and it didn't get updated on the slides. And here's your payment for the three counties. Alameda County at $9,700, Santa Clara County at $13,500, and San Mateo County at $14,150. Here's the actual data for those that want to look at it: Santa Clara County, San Mateo, and Alameda County, or Silicon Valley as a whole. And with that, we're done with Silicon Valley. We're moving on to the Greater Bay Area. We look at 5 regions. One of the regions we look at is Silicon Valley. Then we look at the cities, North Bay, Central Valley, and the Central Coast. Here's the data to start off with. I do want to come over and point out that San Mateo County at $1,792,000 is now the most expensive county, beating out Marin. We all hear about Marin's the most expensive county in the Bay Area. Well, now San Mateo County is beating it out. Santa Clara County beats out San Francisco County. That did not happen before the pandemic. It's just noteworthy. Here we're looking at the Greater Bay Area. You can see that North Bay and Central Valley have roughly the same inventory, and they've come down from a number somewhere around 4,500 down here to a number right around 2,000. That's a very dramatic decrease. Silicon Valley's had roughly the same decrease, but going from some number maybe around 2,800 or something to 16, not quite. And Central Valley and the cities has had an inventory reduction, but not nearly the magnitude, especially if you're looking at just volume of homes. Here's the number of offers that are accepted, and you can see that all 5 areas have less offers than they typically do, and you can see the rough magnitude. Here's days on sold inventory. Now you start seeing here in Silicon Valley, we're at 39 days. San Francisco and Marin is next at 48. Then you go out to the Central Valley at 56, the North Bay at 57, and the Central Coast at 71. That's where this information becomes useful. Here within Northern California area, there's a huge difference between 39 days and 71 days of unsold inventory. Here's your typical time on the market. You're going to see the same thing on that we did on the previous slide: 23 days in Silicon Valley, 55 days for the Central Coast. Huge difference, more than double the time to market the properties. Here's the ask price reductions. Silicon Valley there is the least amount of price reductions. Central Valley is right there on our toes. Same number to the 10th of a decimal point, but you can see Central Valley is plotted slightly below the Silicon Valley. Then you have this Marin, San Francisco, the North Bay, and finally the Central Coast coming in last at 97.4%. Here's how common are price reductions. Silicon Valley has the least at 19%. North Bay has the most price reductions at 36%. More than 1/3 of the sellers are reducing their asking price to get that offer to come in the door. Here's the magnitude of overbidding. Silicon Valley is the highest. Cities is next. Gray is North Bay, Central Valley. And I think the only reason Central Valley is only at 100% is people going to the Central Valley are going there for affordability. They tend not to overbid or tend to overbid very conservatively. And I think that's why, because percentage-wise, they're way up there. Here's the frequency of overbidding, and maybe they are not way up there any longer. Their Central Valley is only at 42% of the sellers are getting more than their asking price. Silicon Valley is at 62%. You're seeing that the regions are quite a bit of difference. Then when you get into the regions, the counties are quite a bit different. And then when you get into the counties, each micro market is quite a bit different. Here's your total appreciation. Doing the worst is the San Francisco and Marin area, where you can see they've only had 36% appreciation compared to Silicon Valley at 73%. The area that's had the highest appreciation is the Central Valley at 85% appreciation. The Central Valley's had almost 3 times the appreciation that San Francisco Marin did. Not quite, 2.5 times, and that's pretty significant, and that's in the past 8 years. Here's looking at the median sold price of the 30 areas. Now, when you bring in all 3 counties of Silicon Valley, the cities is more expensive still, but again, it was San Mateo County is now the most expensive county individually. Here is the Central Coast, North Bay, and Central Valley. Central Valley is still the cheapest area. Here's the payments, the same ratio as the price, because they're all going through the same mathematical formula based on interest rates. And with that, we're complete. The green is what I call my root URL. You add 2023 Saturday morning at 9 o'clock and you get to the live presentation. You add in H for handout, the year 2023, month 12, day '02, and you get the handout. My goal is to get that up 15 minutes before the hour. I did do that this week. You can get the handout and follow through with it if you prefer. And then finally, to get to any specific episode, you put in the green URL and then the month, year, month, date code that you want. I'm Richard Calhoun with Creekside Realty, here for any questions. Let me check. Not seeing any unmuted mics. Thanks. Have a great week. Take care. Bye for now.